Picture this. You're lying in bed, phone in hand, ready to drift off to the soothing sound of random Family Guy trivia. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because tonight we're diving deep into the most bizarre, shocking, and downright disturbing moments that have happened to every single character in Quahog. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at your favorite dysfunctional cartoon family the same way again. Now, before we start this journey through animated trauma, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the worst day of your life was broadcast on national television for millions to laugh at? Well, that's basically every episode of Family Guy for these poor fictional souls. So grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the darkest corners of Seth MacFarlane's twisted imagination. Starting alphabetically with Adam West, because why not begin with a mayor who's nuttier than a fruitcake? This eccentric political figure finally found his soulmate when he married Carol, Lois's sister. For a guy who regularly talks to his own hand and thinks cardboard cutouts are real people, finding true love seemed like a miracle. The wedding was beautiful, the honeymoon was passionate, and for once in his bizarre life, Adam West looked genuinely happy. But happiness in Family Guy is like a snowball in hell. It melts faster than you can say cutaway gag. Carol decided that one mayor wasn't enough for her appetite, so she started having an affair with another man. When Adam discovered this betrayal, instead of walking away with his dignity intact, he challenged the other guy to a duel. Because nothing says rational response like pistols at dawn, right? The worst part wasn't just the cheating. It was watching this lonely, eccentric man desperately fight for someone who clearly didn't deserve his devotion. Carol promised it would never happen again, but we all knew that was complete garbage. Adam deserved so much better than a woman who treated his heart like a revolving door. Moving on to Angela, Peter's former boss at the toy company. Unlike most characters who simply disappear without explanation, Angela got a proper send-off that hit viewers right in the feels. When voice actress Carrie Fisher passed away in real life, the show made the touching decision to address it directly in the series. According to Peter's explanation, Angela died doing what she loved, which was apparently swimming less than 20 minutes after eating. Now, we all know that's an old wives' tale about getting cramps, but in the Family Guy universe, it was enough to send this strong, independent businesswoman to her watery grave. It's both absurd and oddly respectful, which perfectly captures the show's ability to blend humor with genuine emotion. Barbara Pewterschmidt, or Babs as she's known to friends, has endured decades of her husband Carter's wandering eye. This woman has put up with more infidelity than a reality TV show contestant, and somehow she keeps forgiving him. The breaking point came when Peter caught Carter in bed with yet another woman, and after some classic Griffin family blackmail shenanigans, the secret inevitably came out. Picture the devastation on Babs's face when she realized that everyone knew about her husband's latest affair before she did. The humiliation of being the last to know, the embarrassment of having your private pain become public gossip. It's enough to break anyone's spirit. She kicked his crusty behind out of the house and tried to start fresh, but love makes fools of us all, and she eventually took him back. The irony is that Babs isn't exactly innocent herself. She's had her own affairs over the years, including that memorable encounter with Jackie Gleason. But there's something particularly cruel about Carter's public humiliation of his wife that makes this betrayal sting more than the others. Bonnie Swanson represents the dark side of suburban marriage. When she's not cheating on her paralyzed husband, she's literally trying to murder him with ground glass in his food, or buying rickety houses hoping they'll collapse on him. But karma has a way of coming full circle, and Bonnie got a taste of her own medicine in the most humiliating way possible. During their daughter's birthday party, with friends and family gathered around, Bonnie overheard Joe having an affair with a colleague through the baby monitor. Imagine the mortification of discovering your spouse's betrayal while surrounded by people who are supposed to be celebrating your family. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the method of discovery was like something out of a soap opera nightmare. The fact that this happened during what should have been a joyous occasion for their child makes it even more devastating. Bonnie may be a serial cheater herself, but nobody deserves to have their private pain exposed in such a public and humiliating way. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the philosophical dog with more emotional baggage than a therapy convention. Poor Brian has endured countless injuries over the years, from losing his teeth in a fight with Peter to getting his face smashed by a fire hydrant. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was his temporary death in Season 12. Getting hit by that car and actually dying, even if it was only for 2 episodes, represents the ultimate trauma for any character. Death is supposed to be permanent, final, the end of all stories. For Brian to experience that ultimate fear and then somehow return to life, the psychological impact must have been enormous. Think about it from his perspective. One moment he's crossing the street, the next he's presumably facing whatever comes after life. Then suddenly he's back, but with the knowledge that death is real, permanent, and can happen at any moment. That kind of existential trauma would mess with anyone's head, even a talking dog who writes pretentious novels. Bruce's story is one of love, acceptance, and heartbreaking loss. After years of hiding his true self, he finally came out, married his longtime partner Jeffrey, and even had a baby through surrogacy. For the first time in his life, Bruce was living authentically, openly, and happily. He had everything he'd ever wanted: a husband, a child, and the freedom to be himself without shame or fear. But Family Guy has never been kind to happiness, and during what should have been a perfect vacation in Bermuda, tragedy struck in the most brutal way imaginable. Jeffrey's hat fell into the water, and being the loving husband he was, he jumped in to retrieve it. That simple act of devotion cost him his life when a shark attacked and killed him in front of Bruce's horrified eyes. The imagery of watching Jeffrey get torn apart by a predator, followed by the soul-crushing sight of 2 coffins being loaded onto the plane, represents a level of trauma that goes beyond physical pain. Bruce had to watch his dreams of a perfect life literally get devoured before his eyes. Carter Pewterschmidt is arguably one of the most evil characters on the show. This billionaire has hidden cancer cures for profit, destroyed countless lives for money, and shown no remorse for any of his actions. But karma caught up with him in the most ironic way possible when Lois accidentally shot him in the head. The bullet caused severe brain damage that completely changed Carter's personality. Suddenly, this cruel capitalist became kind, generous, and caring. He wanted to give away all his money to charity and live a life of compassion instead of greed. For the first time ever, Carter was actually happy and at peace with himself. But Barbara couldn't stand the thought of losing their fortune, so she shot him in the head again, reversing the brain damage and bringing back the cruel version of her husband. The tragedy isn't just that Carter got shot twice by his own family. It's that he briefly experienced what it felt like to be a good person, only to have that stolen away from him. Chris Griffin's worst moment doesn't involve getting turned into sausage or any of the other bizarre things that happen to him regularly. No. His darkest hour came when the Griffin house caught fire and Herbert the creepy neighbor rushed in to supposedly save him. For a brief moment, it looked like Herbert might actually be a hero, but instead of carrying Chris to safety, he took him straight back to his own house. The most disturbing part wasn't even Herbert's actions. It was his family's complete lack of concern. When they discovered what happened, their reaction was basically that Herbert had earned the right to kidnap Chris. The casual acceptance of what was clearly an inappropriate situation shows just how little Chris's family actually cares about his well-being. Cleveland Brown has endured countless humiliations over the years, from his bathtub crashing through his house repeatedly to various other physical mishaps. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was being betrayed by one of his closest friends in the most heinous way imaginable. Joe Swanson tricked Cleveland into going to what he thought was a vacation in Florida, but was actually a retirement home run by seniors who harvest organs from unsuspecting victims. Joe wanted Peter's legs for himself, but when that plan fell through, he sent Cleveland as a substitute without warning him about the danger. Imagine discovering that someone you trusted with your life had essentially sold you out to organ harvesters. Cleveland literally lost his legs because Joe was too selfish to give up his twisted scheme. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound because it came from someone he considered family. The mystery of Cleveland Jr. represents one of the show's darkest unsolved cases. The original Cleveland Jr. was energetic, slim, and full of life. But suddenly, without explanation, he was replaced by a completely different person who was overweight, slow, and bore no resemblance to the original character. The official explanation is that the original was replaced by a secret agent, but what actually happened to the real Cleveland Jr. remains unknown. The implications are terrifying. Is he dead? Is he being held captive somewhere? Has he been brainwashed? The uncertainty is almost worse than knowing the truth would be. This represents every parent's worst nightmare, having their child disappear and replaced by an imposter while everyone else pretends nothing happened. Cleveland doesn't even seem to notice or care that his son is completely different, which adds another layer of tragedy to the situation. Consuela works harder than anyone else in Quahog, fighting for her fellow maids while cleaning houses for multiple families and even Superman. But her dedication to helping others led her to work for James Woods, a decision she would come to regret in the most horrific way possible. In one of the show's darkest moments, Consuela revealed that Woods had assaulted her nephew, who later took his own life as a result of the trauma. This single line of dialogue carries more weight than entire episodes of physical comedy. It's a reminder that behind the jokes and gags, these characters have real pain and real trauma. The fact that Consuela continued working and fighting for others despite carrying this enormous burden speaks to her incredible strength. But nobody should have to endure such a devastating loss, especially when it could have been prevented. Death himself, the actual Grim Reaper, experienced his own form of mortality when he twisted his ankle while chasing Peter. Suddenly, the being responsible for all death on Earth was sidelined by a simple injury. Without Death able to do his job, chaos erupted as accidents piled up with no consequences. Being forced to hand over his powers to Peter Griffin, of all people, must have been absolutely humiliating for such a powerful entity. Imagine being rendered helpless by something as mundane as a twisted ankle when you're supposed to be one of the most feared forces in the universe. The irony of Death being unable to die from his own injury while watching Peter bungle the most important job in existence must have been torture. Sometimes the worst pain isn't physical. It's watching someone else destroy everything you've worked for. Diane Simmons's downfall began when she discovered she was being replaced by a younger news anchor. After dedicating her life to journalism, the industry she loved was throwing her away like yesterday's newspaper. The rejection and humiliation drove her to madness, leading to a killing spree at James Woods' mansion party. Her plan to frame Tom Tucker and reclaim her career was as desperate as it was violent. But when it all fell apart and she was about to kill Lois, Stewie ended her reign of terror with a single shot. Going from respected journalist to murderous villain to corpse in a matter of hours represents a complete life collapse that few characters have experienced. Dr. Hartman's medical incompetence is legendary, but the one time he actually did his job correctly, it ruined his career. During a routine prostate exam on Peter, he performed the procedure exactly as he was supposed to, but Peter's ignorance and embarrassment led to false assault charges that cost Hartman his medical license. The injustice of losing his livelihood for doing his job properly must have been devastating for someone who, despite his flaws, genuinely wants to help people. Being dragged through court and having his reputation destroyed over a misunderstanding shows how quickly a life can be ruined by ignorance and fear. When Peter later needed the same procedure and had to crawl back to the doctor he destroyed, the humiliation was complete. Hartman eventually got his license back, but the damage to his reputation and the trauma of the legal battle left permanent scars. Ernie the giant chicken has survived countless brutal fights with Peter over the years, but his battle with Meg might have been his last. When Meg moved in with her boyfriend's family and Ernie insulted Peter, she stood up for her father in the most violent way possible. Despite all the abuse Peter has heaped on her over the years, Meg's loyalty to her family ran deep enough that she couldn't stand hearing someone else trash-talk him. Her brutal decapitation of Ernie was both shocking and oddly touching, showing that family bonds can survive even the worst treatment. The sight of Ernie's headless body running around in front of his horrified family was disturbing, even by Family Guy standards. The fact that we didn't get the usual close-up of his eyes suggests this might have been his final defeat, making Meg the one person who could do what Peter never could. The evil monkey's story is actually quite sad when you think about it. For years he terrorized Chris by angrily pointing at him from the closet, but it turns out he was just too shy to start a conversation. All that time, he wasn't evil at all, just socially awkward and misunderstood. But before this revelation, the poor monkey was beaten up by Brian's son Dylan. Being attacked by someone when you're already struggling with social anxiety and communication issues must have been incredibly traumatic. The monkey was already isolated and afraid, and the violence only made things worse. Glenn Quagmire's entire identity revolves around his sexual prowess and his most prized anatomical feature. So when a shark bit off his manhood during a skiing trip, it represented the ultimate nightmare for someone whose whole personality is built around sexual conquest. Watching Quagmire become a shell of himself, miserable and lost without the one thing that defined him, was both comedic and genuinely sad. His entire sense of self-worth was tied to something that could be taken away in an instant, showing how fragile our identities really are. The solution, getting Ida's old equipment with a huge mole on it, was both generous and awkward. Having to explain to potential partners that you're using your father's former anatomy would be enough to give anyone performance anxiety for life. The greased-up deaf guy remained a mystery for years, slipping away from every attempt to catch him while spouting his signature catchphrase. But his origin story revealed a tragic accident that changed him from an ordinary businessman into the greasy enigma we know today. Getting caught in a grease truck explosion severe enough to cause deafness and require constant lubrication to survive sounds absolutely horrifying. Imagine going from a normal life to being a permanently slippery outcast who can't hear and can barely communicate with others. The transformation from respected professional to neighborhood oddity represents a complete loss of identity and social connection. He went from being someone people respected to someone they actively tried to avoid or capture. Herbert's backstory adds a dark historical element to his character. As a World War II pilot who was shot down and sent to a concentration camp, he experienced some of humanity's darkest hours. Being forced to do degrading work like sorting recyclables while imprisoned shows how war can strip away dignity and humanity. The fact that he describes the sticky trash as the worst part, while clearly downplaying much more serious trauma, suggests a coping mechanism of focusing on minor irritations to avoid confronting deeper pain. His current inappropriate behavior toward Chris might stem from the psychological damage of his wartime experiences. Ida's journey represents the struggle of living authentically while facing rejection from those you love most. When she came out as transgender to her son Quagmire, instead of receiving support, she was shunned and rejected. Being abandoned by your own child for being true to yourself is one of the cruelest forms of emotional pain. Even after Quagmire eventually accepted her, he later forced her to choose between him and her relationship with Brian. Making someone pick between their child and their chance at happiness is pure selfishness, especially after she had already made the generous gesture of giving him her former anatomy. Joe Swanson's transformation from paraplegic to quadriplegic during a bull run represents every disabled person's worst fear, losing even more independence and control over their life. Being paralyzed from the neck down instead of just the waist changed everything for him. The abandonment that followed was even worse than the physical trauma. His wife Bonnie immediately left him for Europe, claiming she didn't sign up for this level of care. His friends tried to help, but eventually dumped him in a terrible state facility when it became too much work. Being betrayed by both your spouse and your closest friends when you need them most is a special kind of hell. Joe eventually regained some function, but the emotional scars of abandonment would last forever. Jerome carries the heaviest emotional burden of any character on the show. Losing his wife to cancer just 1 week after their wedding, followed by his daughter's death from pneumonia 6 weeks later, represents a level of tragedy that transcends comedy. Even in a cartoon universe where death and destruction happen regularly, Jerome's story stands out as genuinely heartbreaking. The timing of these losses, coming right after what should have been the happiest moments of his life, makes the tragedy even more poignant. Jillian's happiness was shattered when Diane Simmons murdered her husband Derek during her killing spree. After being jerked around by Brian and finally finding a good man to marry, having that torn away by random violence must have been devastating. The look of absolute devastation on her face when she realized her husband was dead spoke volumes about the depth of her loss. Going from newlywed bliss to widow in a matter of moments represents the kind of trauma that changes someone forever. The Kool-Aid Man, despite being a corporate mascot, became a victim of Stewie's evil twin in one of the show's more surreal moments. Having your glass body smashed and your contents consumed by a psychotic baby represents a uniquely cartoonish form of murder. The fact that he returned later suggests some form of immortality, but the experience of being destroyed and consumed must have been traumatic even for a sentient beverage container. Lois Griffin has endured tremendous physical and emotional trauma over the years. While getting killed by Stewie in a simulation doesn't count as real, her other experiences are genuinely horrific. Getting boiling oil thrown on her by Peter left her with severe burns covering her entire body, but arguably worse was the mental trauma of watching Peter perform oral acts on her sick mother due to a hypnotherapy mishap. Physical burns heal, but that mental image would haunt her forever. The violation of boundaries and the grotesque nature of the incident make it worse than any physical injury. Loretta Brown's death was both tragic and disturbing. Falling to her death when Peter destroyed her house was bad enough, but Quagmire's necrophilic intentions afterward added another layer of horror to her fate. Being killed by your ex-husband's friend's stupidity and then having your corpse violated represents a complete denial of dignity, even in death. The fact that this was played for laughs makes it even more disturbing. Meg Griffin has endured so much abuse that choosing just one worst moment seems impossible. She's been shot, stabbed, humiliated, and ignored by her family for years. But losing her arms and legs while becoming deaf, dumb, and blind represents the ultimate disability nightmare. Being completely helpless and unable to communicate or care for yourself while still being conscious and aware would be torture beyond imagination. The combination of physical disability and sensory deprivation creates a prison worse than any jail cell. Mort Goldman's loss of his wife Muriel was made even more tragic by his inability to think of anything positive to say about their marriage. After decades together, being unable to recall a single happy memory suggests a relationship built on obligation rather than love. The fact that she died violently during Diane's killing spree adds sudden trauma to what might have otherwise been a natural parting. Having your spouse murdered while you're realizing your marriage was empty creates a complex grief that would be hard to process. Neil Goldman's humiliation when Meg kissed him during a crisis was compounded by his own poor judgment in broadcasting the moment publicly. Instead of treasuring a private moment, he turned it into a public spectacle that embarrassed them both. His subsequent suicide attempt showed how deeply the rejection affected him, but his actions had already ruined any chance he might have had with Meg. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are consequences of our own poor choices. Peter Griffin has caused enormous destruction throughout the series, but he's also been on the receiving end of significant trauma. Learning that his father figure wasn't his biological father created an identity crisis that shook his understanding of who he was. The existential pain of questioning your entire life story and family history cuts deeper than any physical injury. Peter's struggle to understand his place in the world after this revelation showed a vulnerability that's rare for his character. Seamus represents the ultimate survivor, having lost most of his body parts to various predators over the years. Whether it was James Woods, sharks, or other creatures, The systematic loss of limbs and organs while somehow remaining alive and conscious is a nightmare beyond comprehension. The fact that his origin story keeps changing suggests that the trauma was so severe he can't even remember it clearly. Living as mostly wood and prosthetics while maintaining consciousness would be a constant reminder of everything he's lost. Stewie Griffin has endured incredible trauma for a 1-year-old baby. From dingo attacks to being fused with his teddy bear, his young life has been filled with horror. But the worst incident was when he split his head open falling downstairs, and his family refused to get him medical attention. Instead of rushing him to the hospital, they tried to cover up the injury and hide the evidence. Watching a raccoon gnaw on his exposed brain, while his family worried more about getting in trouble than his health, shows a level of neglect that borders on criminal. The fact that he spent months in a coma while they continued to prioritize their own convenience over his life demonstrates how little they truly care about him despite their occasional shows of affection. Tom Tucker's identity crisis when he faced replacement by a younger anchor led to a complete career meltdown. Following Peter's advice to get tattoos live on air was the final nail in his professional coffin, destroying everything he'd worked for his entire life. Being fired from the job that defined him and then nearly committing suicide over the loss shows how completely his sense of self was tied to his career. The humiliation of having his replacement want to interview him before his suicide attempt added insult to injury. Trisha Takanawa's fate during the Y2K apocalypse episode, becoming a victim of cannibalism, represents the ultimate objectification. Being reduced to literal food for other people strips away every aspect of humanity and dignity. Even in a post-apocalyptic setting, the casual way her consumption was discussed shows how completely society had broken down and how little value was placed on individual human life. Each of these characters has faced their own unique form of suffering, from physical trauma to emotional devastation to existential crisis. What makes these moments particularly impactful is how they contrast with the show's usual comedic tone. When Family Guy decides to get dark, it doesn't hold back. These aren't just random gags or throwaway jokes. They're genuine character moments that reveal the psychological depth hiding beneath the surface humor. The fact that these characters continue to function and interact normally after experiencing such trauma speaks to both human resilience and the show's commitment to treating serious subjects with the same casual attitude as everything else. Understanding these worst moments helps us appreciate the full scope of what these characters have endured. It's easy to laugh at their misfortunes when they're presented as comedy, but examining them seriously reveals a tapestry of human suffering that would challenge anyone's sanity. The genius of Family Guy lies in its ability to make us laugh at things that would horrify us in real life. By presenting extreme trauma in a comedic context, the show allows us to process difficult emotions and experiences in a safe environment. These characters serve as vessels for our own fears and anxieties, experiencing the worst possible outcomes so we don't have to. Their resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering provides a strange form of comfort and inspiration. Whether it's betrayal by loved ones, physical mutilation, loss of identity, or complete abandonment, every character has faced their ultimate nightmare and somehow survived to appear in the next episode. The cyclical nature of their suffering, where trauma is quickly forgotten and life returns to normal, reflects how we often deal with our own pain by compartmentalizing and moving forward rather than dwelling on past hurts. But tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can take comfort in knowing that no matter how bad your day was, at least you're not a Family Guy character. At least you don't have to worry about your house being destroyed by a giant chicken, your spouse cheating with your neighbor, or your family refusing to take you to the hospital when your brain is exposed. Sweet dreams, and remember that in the morning, you'll wake up in a world that's probably a little less chaotic than Quahog, Rhode Island. Though given the state of things these days, that might not be as comforting as it used to be. But hey, that's a worry for tomorrow. Tonight, just let the absurd suffering of animated characters lull you into peaceful slumber, secure in the knowledge that your problems are probably more manageable than theirs. Sleep tight, and don't let the evil monkeys point at you from the closet. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated comedy? Tonight, We're diving deep into the wild world of Family Guy with facts so fascinating they might just lull you into the most entertaining sleep of your life. From secret voice acting techniques to hidden Easter eggs that took fans decades to discover, these are the Family Guy facts that will blow your mind. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator named Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped office, sketching what would become one of television's most controversial and beloved families. Little did he know that his creation would survive cancellation twice, spark international debates, and become a cultural phenomenon that would define comedy for generations. But here's the thing. The story of Family Guy is far more incredible than anything Peter Griffin could ever dream up. Let's start with something that will immediately grab your attention. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox? The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Network executives thought the show was too edgy, too controversial, and frankly, too weird for mainstream television. They were wrong, dead wrong. The show's popularity on Adult Swim and DVD sales were so massive that Fox had no choice but to bring it back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007. But once again, fan outcry and incredible ratings forced the network to reverse their decision. This makes Family Guy one of the only shows in television history to be resurrected twice by pure fan power. Here's where things get really interesting. Seth MacFarlane, the creative genius behind the show, almost wasn't around to see his creation succeed. On September 11, 2001, MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11. Yes, that Flight 11. He was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but a combination of a hangover and his travel agent giving him the wrong departure time caused him to miss the flight by just 10 minutes. That flight crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. If not for that hangover and scheduling mix-up, there might never have been a Family Guy renaissance, no American Dad, no The Orville. The entire landscape of modern animation could have been completely different. Now, let's talk about voices, because this is where Family Guy becomes absolutely mind-blowing. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just create the show. He voices Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Stewie Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewter Schmidt. That's 6 major characters, each with completely distinct personalities and vocal patterns. But here's the kicker. He does all of these voices live, in real time, often switching between characters mid-sentence during recording sessions. The other voice actors have described watching MacFarlane work as like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder, except it's all controlled and brilliant. Speaking of Stewie, let's address the elephant in the room. For years, fans debated whether Stewie was gay, straight, or something else entirely. Seth MacFarlane finally settled this debate in a way that's both hilarious and profound. According to MacFarlane, Stewie's sexuality is intentionally fluid and undefined because he's a baby. Babies don't have developed sexual identities. The joke isn't about his orientation. It's about the absurdity of a 1-year-old having any romantic inclinations at all. This clever writing choice allows the character to be whatever the story needs him to be, making him one of the most versatile characters in television comedy. Here's a fact that will make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single cutaway gag in Family Guy is hand-drawn and animated, even the ones that last only 3 seconds. The animation team creates full character models, backgrounds, and even choreography for jokes that might get a 2-second laugh. This dedication to craft is why Family Guy's visual comedy feels so rich and detailed compared to other animated shows that rely on cheaper animation shortcuts. The show's controversial reputation isn't accidental. It's carefully calculated. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that many of the most outrageous jokes are specifically designed to distract from the show's more subtle social commentary. While audiences are debating whether a particular gag went too far, they're absorbing deeper messages about American culture, politics, and society. It's comedy as intellectual sleight of hand, and it works brilliantly. Let's dive into some character origins that will surprise you. Brian Griffin, the intellectual family dog, was originally going to be just a regular pet with no speaking lines. MacFarlane added Brian's voice and personality during the pilot episode because he felt the family needed a voice of reason, someone who could call out Peter's ridiculous behavior while still being part of the family dynamic. The character became so integral that many episodes are built entirely around Brian's storylines. Here's something that might change how you watch the show forever. The Griffin family's house layout has been deliberately inconsistent throughout the series. Sometimes there are different numbers of rooms, staircases appear and disappear, and the kitchen changes size depending on what the scene requires. This isn't sloppy animation. It's an intentional choice. MacFarlane wanted the house to feel like a cartoon space where anything could happen, rather than a realistic location that would limit storytelling possibilities. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't originally supposed to become a recurring gag. The first chicken fight was written as a one-off joke for a single episode. However, the animation team had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they kept finding excuses to bring it back. These sequences now take weeks to animate and are some of the most expensive scenes the show produces, but they've become so beloved by fans that the network happily approves the budget every time. Let's talk about the show's relationship with censorship because it's more complex than you might think. Family Guy has actually been censored differently in various countries, creating unique versions of episodes around the world. In some regions, entire storylines are removed or altered. This has created a strange phenomenon where hardcore fans collect different international versions of episodes to see how the same jokes are handled in different cultural contexts. It's like a global experiment in comedy and censorship. Here's a technical fact that showcases the show's evolution. Early Family Guy episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, but the show gradually transitioned to digital animation. However, they maintained the hand-drawn look by using digital tools that mimic traditional animation methods. This hybrid approach gives Family Guy its distinctive visual style that looks both modern and classically animated. The writing process for Family Guy is unlike any other television show. The writer's room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional TV writing environment. Writers pitch jokes constantly, and the best ones get integrated into episodes regardless of whether they fit the main storyline. This is why the show's cutaway gags often feel so random and disconnected. They literally are random jokes that were too funny not to use. Speaking of cutaway gags, there's actually a complex system for categorizing them. The writers have developed an internal rating system for gags based on how offensive, surreal, or topical they are. This helps them balance episodes so that viewers get a mix of different comedy styles. Too many surreal gags in a row can lose audiences, while too many topical jokes can date an episode quickly. Here's something that will make you appreciate the voice acting even more. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, originally auditioned for a completely different character. She was supposed to voice a minor recurring character, but her chemistry with Seth MacFarlane during the audition was so strong that they rewrote Lois's personality to match Borstein's natural comedic instincts. This collaborative approach to character development is why the Griffin family feels so authentic despite being completely absurd. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture, political discourse, and even academic studies on contemporary humor. Universities now offer courses that analyze Family Guy episodes as examples of postmodern comedy and cultural commentary. The show that was once considered too lowbrow for television is now being studied by scholars as a significant cultural artifact. Let's explore the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Unlike many animated shows that simply hire celebrities to play themselves, Family Guy often asks famous people to voice completely different characters. This approach has led to some surprising performances where you might not even recognize the celebrity's voice. The casting directors specifically look for celebrities who can disappear into their roles rather than just showing up to be famous. Here's a behind-the-scenes fact about the show's music. Every song in Family Guy, from the opening theme to the elaborate musical numbers, is composed and performed by professional musicians. Seth MacFarlane, who has released several jazz albums, personally oversees the musical aspects of the show. The orchestra recordings are done with full ensembles, giving the show's music a richness that most animated comedies can't match. The show's approach to social issues is more sophisticated than critics often acknowledge. Family Guy frequently tackles controversial topics, but the show's official stance is usually revealed through Brian's character, who serves as the moral compass. When Peter does something outrageous, Brian's reaction often represents the show's actual position on the issue. This allows the show to explore controversial territory while maintaining a clear ethical framework. Here's something that might surprise casual viewers. Family Guy has actually won several prestigious awards, including Emmy nominations and Annie Awards for animation excellence. The show's reputation for controversy sometimes overshadows its technical and artistic achievements, but industry professionals consistently recognize the quality of its writing, animation, and voice acting. The international success of Family Guy has led to some fascinating cultural adaptations. In some countries, local writers create original cutaway gags that reference local culture and politics while maintaining the show's overall style. These regional variations have become collector's items for international fans who want to see how different cultures interpret the Family Guy format. Let's discuss the show's relationship with its own continuity. Family Guy deliberately ignores its own timeline and character development, treating each episode as a standalone story. Characters die and come back to life. Major life events are forgotten, and personality traits change based on what's funny for individual episodes. This approach was revolutionary in television comedy and has influenced countless other shows. The animation style of Family Guy was specifically designed to be cost-effective while maintaining quality. The character designs use simple shapes and limited color palettes, which makes animation faster and cheaper. However, the show compensates for this simplicity with incredibly detailed backgrounds and elaborate action sequences. This balance between efficiency and spectacle is part of what makes the show economically sustainable. Here's a fact about the show's writing timeline that might surprise you. Family Guy episodes are often written months or even years before they air, which means the writers have to predict which topics will still be relevant by broadcast time. This has led to some episodes that feel incredibly timely and others that reference events or celebrities that are no longer culturally significant. The writers have learned to focus on timeless themes and universal human experiences that will remain funny regardless of when the episode airs. The show's approach to parody is methodical and research-intensive. When Family Guy decides to parody a movie, television show, or cultural phenomenon, the writers study the source material extensively. They watch movies multiple times, read reviews and analyses, and even interview people involved in the original productions. This thorough research is why Family Guy parodies often capture subtle details that casual viewers of the original material might miss. Speaking of parodies, let's talk about the show's relationship with other animated comedies. Family Guy exists in a strange competitive space with shows like The Simpsons and South Park. Rather than avoiding comparisons, the show has embraced them, creating episodes that directly reference and interact with these other shows. This meta approach to animated comedy has created a shared universe of sorts where different animated families acknowledge each other's existence. The voice recording process for Family Guy is surprisingly collaborative. While Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, the other actors often improvise and ad-lib during recording sessions. Many of the funniest moments in episodes come from spontaneous interactions between voice actors that weren't in the original script. The show's editors then work to integrate these improvised moments into the final episodes. Here's something that showcases the show's attention to detail. Family Guy maintains detailed character backstories and family histories that extend far beyond what's shown in episodes. The writers have created extensive biographies for each character, including childhood experiences, educational backgrounds, and psychological profiles. This hidden depth informs how characters react to different situations, even in seemingly random cutaway gags. The show's international broadcast has created some unique censorship challenges. Different countries have different standards for what can be shown on television, which means episodes are edited differently around the world. Some countries remove entire storylines, while others simply bleep out specific words or blur certain images. This has created a fascinating study in how different cultures approach comedy and censorship. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. The show's rapid-fire joke style and quotable dialogue have made it perfect for meme culture. Countless Family Guy moments have become viral internet content, often introducing the show to audiences who have never watched full episodes. This digital second life has helped maintain the show's cultural relevance across different generations. The animation team for Family Guy includes artists from around the world, creating a truly international production. Animators in different countries work on different aspects of each episode, with sophisticated coordination systems ensuring consistency across the global production pipeline. This international approach brings diverse artistic perspectives to the show while maintaining its distinctive American humor. Let's talk about the show's relationship with its own merchandise. Family Guy products range from traditional items like t-shirts and toys to unusual collaborations with high-end fashion brands and gourmet food companies. The show's irreverent attitude extends to its commercial partnerships, often resulting in products that are as surprising and unconventional as the show itself. The show's approach to holiday episodes demonstrates its sophisticated understanding of audience expectations. Rather than creating simple seasonal content, Family Guy holiday episodes often subvert traditional holiday tropes while still delivering the emotional satisfaction that viewers expect from seasonal television. This balance between cynicism and sentimentality is one of the show's most impressive achievements. Here's a final fact that brings everything full circle. Family Guy's survival and success represent more than just entertainment industry triumph. The show's journey from cancellation to cultural phenomenon demonstrates how modern media consumption has changed. In the pre-internet era, a canceled show stayed canceled. But Family Guy's resurrection through DVD sales, syndication, and streaming proved that audiences had more power than anyone realized. The show didn't just come back from the dead. It helped establish new models for how television shows can build and maintain audiences across multiple platforms and decades. As we wind down this journey through the fascinating world of Family Guy, remember that behind every outrageous joke and controversial moment is a team of artists, writers, and performers who have dedicated their careers to making people laugh. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has undeniably changed television comedy forever. From its near-death experiences to its current status as a cultural institution, the show proves that sometimes the most unlikely ideas become the most enduring successes. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, anything is possible, no matter how ridiculous it might seem. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the surprisingly deep world of Family Guy. Tonight, we're going to explore the hidden layers, the forgotten stories, and the intricate details that make up one of television's most enduring animated series. This isn't your typical Family Guy experience filled with cutaway gags and rapid-fire jokes. Instead, we're diving into the quieter side of Quahog, where stories unfold slowly and mysteries reveal themselves like pages in a well-worn book. Picture yourself settling into the most comfortable spot in your home, perhaps the same way Peter Griffin settles into his beloved chair at the Drunken Clam. The familiar weight of routine, the comfort of knowing exactly where everything belongs, and the gentle rhythm of a world that somehow makes sense despite all its chaos. That's where we're going tonight, into the heart of what makes Family Guy more than just a comedy show. Let's begin our journey in the early days, back when Family Guy was just a spark of an idea in Seth MacFarlane's imagination. The year was 1995, and MacFarlane was a young animator fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. He created a short film called The Life of Larry, featuring a character who would eventually become Peter Griffin. But Larry was different from Peter in subtle ways that tell us something important about how stories evolve and grow over time. In those earliest concepts, the family dynamics were softer, more grounded in reality. The humor came from observation rather than spectacle. McFarlane was drawing from his own experiences growing up in Connecticut, watching how families really interacted when no one was performing for an audience. The quiet moments between the big events, the small conversations that happen in kitchens and living rooms when the day is winding down. The Griffin house itself tells a story that many people overlook. Located at 31 Spooner Street in Quahog, Rhode Island, this fictional address represents something deeper than just a setting for comedy. The house is modest, middle class, lived in. The wallpaper is slightly dated. The furniture shows signs of daily use, and there's always something slightly askew that suggests real people live here, not television characters. If you've ever noticed the way light filters through the Griffin living room windows during different episodes, you'll see that the animators pay careful attention to time of day and season. Morning light has a different quality than evening light, and winter episodes show the subtle blue-gray tones that anyone who's lived in New England recognizes immediately. These details create a sense of place that goes beyond the jokes, grounding the fantastic elements in something real and familiar. Peter Griffin himself is often dismissed as simply a loud, obnoxious character designed for easy laughs. But when you look closer, when you pay attention to the quieter moments, you see something more complex. Peter represents the struggle of many middle-aged men who feel caught between the expectations of adulthood and the desire to remain young at heart. His job at the brewery, his friendship with his co-workers, his genuine love for his family despite his obvious flaws. These elements create a character who is both ridiculous and surprisingly human. Consider Peter's relationship with his father-in-law, Francis Griffin. Their conflicts aren't just about comedy. They represent a clash between generations, between different ways of seeing the world. Francis, with his strict religious views and rigid moral code, represents an older America, while Peter embodies a more casual, irreverent approach to life. Their arguments, when you strip away the exaggerated elements, echo conversations happening in living rooms across the country. Lois Griffin, too, is more than she initially appears. Her background as a member of the wealthy Pewter-Schmidt family adds layers to her character that aren't always front and center. She chose to marry Peter, chose the middle-class life, chose to prioritize family over the privilege she grew up with. This choice reverberates through many episodes in subtle ways, informing her reactions to situations and her approach to problems. The way Lois handles the chaos that constantly surrounds her family reveals a kind of quiet strength. She's the anchor that keeps the Griffin household from completely spinning out of control. Watch her in the background of scenes sometime, and you'll notice how she's always doing something. Cleaning up a mess, preparing a meal, mediating a conflict. She's the invisible infrastructure that makes the visible comedy possible. Brian Griffin presents perhaps the most interesting character study in the entire series. An anthropomorphic dog who writes novels, drinks martinis, and engages in philosophical discussions, Brian serves as both the family's voice of reason and its most pretentious member. But his character represents something deeper about the struggle between artistic ambition and practical reality. Brian's novels never get published, his political activism rarely accomplishes anything concrete, and his romantic relationships consistently fail. Yet he continues trying, continues believing that his next project will be the one that breaks through. This persistence in the face of repeated failure makes him oddly admirable, even when his intellectual posturing becomes insufferable. He represents the part of all of us that refuses to give up on our dreams, even when evidence suggests we probably should. The relationship between Brian and Stewie has evolved over the years into something genuinely touching. What started as a simple premise, a sophisticated baby and an intellectual dog, has become a friendship between two characters who recognize something of themselves in each other. They're both outsiders in their own family, both struggling with identity and purpose, both searching for meaning in a world that often seems meaningless. Stewie Griffin, the evil genius baby, carries perhaps the heaviest burden of any character in the show. His advanced intelligence, trapped in an infant's body, creates a kind of existential prison. He understands the world around him better than most adults, but he's powerless to change his circumstances. This fundamental frustration drives much of his behavior, from his elaborate schemes to his constant threats of matricide. But Stewie's character has softened over the years, revealing vulnerability beneath the villainy. His relationship with his mother has evolved from antagonistic to genuinely affectionate. His sexuality, hinted at but never explicitly confirmed, adds another layer of complexity to a character who already struggles with identity and belonging. Stewie represents the pain of being misunderstood, of having thoughts and feelings that the world isn't ready to accept. Meg Griffin occupies a unique position in the Family Guy universe as the perpetual outsider. While the treatment she receives from her family is often cruel beyond what real families would tolerate, her character represents something painfully real about adolescence. The feeling of being invisible, unwanted, fundamentally flawed in ways that everyone else can see, but you can't fix. The running joke of everyone hating Meg becomes less funny when you consider what it might feel like to be her. High school is difficult enough without your own family treating you as an embarrassment. Yet Meg persists, continues hoping for acceptance, continues trying to find her place in the world. Her resilience, rarely acknowledged within the show itself, is actually quite remarkable. Chris Griffin, the gentle giant of the family, provides a different perspective on teenage life. While Meg struggles with social rejection, Chris seems largely oblivious to social hierarchies. His innocence, while sometimes played for laughs, also serves as a reminder of what we lose as we grow older and become more aware of how cruel the world can be. The supporting characters of Quahog create a rich tapestry of small-town life. Glenn Quagmire, the sex-obsessed neighbor, represents unchecked desire and the consequences of living without moral boundaries. Cleveland Brown, before his move to Virginia, served as Peter's most loyal friend, the voice of reason who was usually ignored but never gave up trying to help. Joe Swanson, the wheelchair-bound police officer, demonstrates how disability doesn't define a person's worth or capabilities. His enthusiasm for life, his dedication to his job, and his fierce competitiveness in sports show a character who refuses to be limited by his circumstances. Joe's presence in the show normalizes disability in a way that's both respectful and matter-of-fact. The Drunken Clam, Quahog's local bar, serves as more than just a setting for Peter's adventures. It represents a particular kind of American institution, the neighborhood bar where working-class men gather to escape the pressures of daily life. The conversations that happen there, while often ridiculous, echo real discussions about work, family, politics, and dreams deferred. Jerome, the bartender, observes it all with the wisdom that comes from listening to people's problems night after night. He rarely offers advice, but his presence provides stability in a place where emotions run high and judgment is temporarily suspended. The Drunken Clam is a sanctuary where the ordinary rules of polite society don't apply, where men can be honest about their fears and failures without losing face. The Pawtucket Brewery, where Peter works, represents the changing nature of American manufacturing. It's not the steel mill or automotive plant that previous generations might have worked in, but it still provides the steady employment that allows families like the Griffins to maintain their middle-class lifestyle. The brewery's various corporate changes throughout the series reflect the instability that many American workers have experienced in recent decades. Peter's co-workers, Opie, Joe, and Quagmire during his brief stint there, create a workplace dynamic that many viewers recognize from their own jobs. The casual conversations, the small rebellions against management, the friendships formed over shared frustrations, these elements ground the show's more fantastical elements in workplace reality that feels authentic. Quahog itself, while fictional, captures the essence of small New England towns. The layout includes all the necessary elements: a downtown area with small businesses, residential neighborhoods with tree-lined streets, and enough local institutions to support community life. The recurring locations like the grocery store, the post office, and various restaurants create a sense of place that makes Quahog feel real despite the surreal events that occur there. The weather in Quahog follows New England patterns: snowy winters, mild springs, hot summers, and colorful autumns. These seasonal changes affect the characters' daily lives in subtle ways. Winter episodes often show characters bundled in coats and dealing with snow, while summer episodes feature barbecues and outdoor activities. These details create continuity and realism that supports the show's more outrageous elements. Family Guy's approach to time is interesting and worth considering as we wind down our journey tonight. Unlike shows with strict continuity, Family Guy exists in a kind of floating timeline where characters don't age and consequences rarely carry over from episode to episode. This allows for maximum creative freedom, but also creates a sense of eternal present that can be oddly comforting. The Griffin family remains frozen at particular life stages. Meg will always be the awkward teenager. Chris will always be the sweet-natured high schooler. Stewie will always be the brilliant baby. This stability provides viewers with the comfort of knowing that no matter how chaotic individual episodes become, the fundamental relationships will remain constant. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for serve a function beyond simple comedy. They represent the way human minds actually work, constantly making connections, remembering random events, getting distracted by tangential thoughts. While these segments are often criticized for disrupting narrative flow, they actually mirror the way we experience consciousness, jumping from thought to thought in patterns that don't always make logical sense, but feel natural to us. The show's references to popular culture create a shared language between the creators and viewers. When Family Guy references a movie, television show, or historical event, it assumes a level of cultural literacy that creates intimacy between the show and its audience. These references also serve as time capsules, preserving moments from specific eras in American culture. The music in Family Guy deserves special attention as we prepare for sleep. The show's original compositions, from Stewie's elaborate musical numbers to the simple melodies that accompany quiet moments, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how music affects emotion. The orchestral score swells during dramatic moments, softens during tender scenes, and provides rhythmic support for comedy sequences. Seth MacFarlane's own musical background influences the show's approach to song and dance. The elaborate production numbers scattered throughout the series showcase not just comedic timing, but genuine musical theater skills. These moments provide emotional release and allow characters to express feelings that might be difficult to convey through dialogue alone. The animation style of Family Guy has evolved over the years while maintaining its essential character. The simple, clean lines and bright colors create a visual language that's both accessible and distinctive. The character designs, while seemingly basic, actually demonstrate careful attention to body language and facial expression that communicates emotion effectively. The way characters move through space in Family Guy reflects their personalities. Peter's movements are often clumsy and enthusiastic, reflecting his impulsive nature. Lois moves with purpose and grace, suggesting her competence and self-control. Brian's movements are more human-like than dog-like, reinforcing his role as the family's intellectual. Stewie's movements combine baby-like physicality with adult-like precision, highlighting his unique position between childhood and sophistication. The Griffin family home changes subtly throughout the series, with rooms occasionally rearranged and new details added. These changes suggest the natural evolution of a lived-in space. Furniture gets replaced, decorations change with the seasons, and wear patterns develop in places where characters spend the most time. These details create the impression of a real home where real people have made real memories. As we near the end of our journey through Family Guy lore, it's worth considering what the show reveals about American family life in the early 21st century. The Griffins face many of the same challenges as real families: financial pressures, generational conflicts, changing social norms, and the difficulty of maintaining connections in an increasingly fragmented world. The show's longevity suggests that it touches something universal about family dynamics. Despite the exaggerated circumstances and impossible situations, the core relationships ring true. Parents worry about their children, siblings compete for attention, spouses negotiate the balance between individual desires and family responsibilities, and everyone struggles with the gap between who they want to be and who they actually are. The recurring themes of acceptance and belonging run throughout Family Guy's episodes. Characters search for their place in the world, sometimes finding it in unexpected places or through unlikely relationships. The show suggests that family isn't just about blood relations, but about choosing to care for each other despite obvious flaws and frequent disappointments. The community of Quahog, with all its eccentric residents and improbable situations, represents an idealized version of small-town life where everyone knows everyone else and shared experiences create bonds that survive even the most ridiculous conflicts. It's a place where consequences can be reset with each new episode, where mistakes can be forgiven, and where tomorrow always offers a fresh start. As you drift toward sleep, think about the gentle rhythms of daily life in Quahog, the morning routine of getting the family ready for school and work, the comfortable predictability of Peter's job at the brewery, the evening gatherings at the Drunken Clam where friends share their thoughts and frustrations. These ordinary moments, scattered between the extraordinary adventures, create the foundation that makes everything else possible. The love that binds the Griffin family together isn't always obvious, often buried beneath layers of sarcasm, conflict, and mutual frustration. But it's there in the small gestures. Lois making Peter's favorite meal after a difficult day, Brian staying up late to help Stewie with a project, Meg defending her family despite their treatment of her, Chris offering innocent observations that accidentally provide exactly the wisdom someone needed to hear. Let the warm familiarity of the Griffin household surround you now. Picture the soft glow of the television in their living room, the comfortable wear patterns on their favorite chairs, the family photos scattered throughout the house that document years of shared experiences. Feel the sense of belonging that comes from being part of something larger than yourself, even when that something is imperfect and often chaotic. The stories we've explored tonight reveal Family Guy as more than simple entertainment. It's a meditation on what it means to be human in contemporary America, an exploration of how families function when stripped of pretense, and a reminder that love persists even in the most unlikely circumstances. The show's ability to find humor in everyday frustrations while maintaining genuine affection for its characters creates a unique space in popular culture where viewers can laugh at themselves while feeling understood. As sleep approaches, let yourself settle into the rhythms we've discovered together, the predictable chaos of the Griffin household, the reliable friendship of the Drunken Clam regulars, the seasonal changes that mark time's passage in Quahog. These elements create a world that's both fantastical and familiar, where anything can happen but fundamental truths about human nature remain constant. Rest now in the knowledge that somewhere in the animated landscape of television, the Griffin family continues their daily routines. Peter will wake up tomorrow ready for another adventure. Lois will organize whatever chaos emerges. Brian will pursue his literary ambitions with renewed optimism. Stewie will scheme and dream in equal measure. Meg will hope for acceptance while finding strength in solitude. And Chris will greet each new day with innocent enthusiasm. The gentle humor and unexpected wisdom we've uncovered tonight will remain with you, providing comfort and perspective as you navigate your own daily adventures. The world of Family Guy, with all its absurdity and heart, reminds us that families are imperfect, life is unpredictable, and laughter really can be the best medicine for whatever challenges we face. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as a quiet evening in Quahog, where the street lights cast gentle shadows on familiar sidewalks and the promise of tomorrow's adventures waits patiently for morning to arrive. Have you ever wondered what happens when you dive deep into the twisted, chaotic universe of Family Guy, while your brain is winding down for sleep? Tonight, we're going on a journey through the most bizarre, darkest, and surprisingly complex lore hidden beneath the surface of Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece. From alternate realities to character deaths that actually matter, from time travel paradoxes to the secret history of Quahog itself, This is going to be the most comprehensive exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths you've ever experienced. But before we begin our descent into this animated rabbit hole, let me warn you. What you're about to discover might change how you see those seemingly random cutaway gags forever. Because underneath all that crude humor and pop culture references lies a narrative so intricate and dark that it makes other animated series look like children's picture books. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and prepare to have your mind blown as we uncover the secret lore of Family Guy that most viewers never notice. Our story begins not with the Griffins we know today, but with a question that haunts every longtime viewer. How many times has this family actually died? The answer is more disturbing than you might think. Throughout the series, we've witnessed multiple universe resets, character resurrections, and timeline manipulations that suggest something far more sinister is happening in Quahog than meets the eye. Let's start with Brian Griffin, whose death in Season 12 wasn't just a ratings stunt. It revealed something crucial about the Family Guy universe. When Brian was killed by a car, the emotional weight of his death felt different from the usual cartoon violence we're accustomed to. But here's where it gets interesting. His replacement, Vinny, wasn't just a random character. He represented a glimpse into what the show could become without its moral compass, its voice of reason in a house full of chaos. The fact that Stewie was able to travel back in time to save Brian tells us something profound about the nature of time itself in this universe. Time travel isn't just a plot device in Family Guy. It's a fundamental force that shapes reality. Stewie's time machine isn't just some random invention. It's connected to a larger cosmic framework that governs how this universe operates. Consider this. Every time we see Stewie travel through time, reality doesn't just change, it fractures. We're shown multiple timelines existing simultaneously, each one revealing different aspects of the Griffin family's true nature. In some timelines, Peter never met Lois. In others, Meg is the favorite child. These aren't just alternate realities for comedy, they're glimpses into the infinite possibilities that exist when time itself becomes malleable. But time travel is just the beginning of Family Guy's cosmic horror. Let's talk about the multiverse theory that runs through the entire series. The show has explicitly confirmed that multiple universes exist, each with their own version of the Griffin family. We've seen evil versions, dog versions, even versions where the family members have completely different personalities and life paths. This multiverse concept becomes even more disturbing when you realize that some episodes might not be taking place in the same universe we started with. That feeling you get when character personalities seem inconsistent or when major events are forgotten. It might not be lazy writing. It might be because we're actually watching a different universe entirely. The chicken fights between Peter and Ernie represent something deeper than just extended fight sequences. They're battles between order and chaos, between different philosophical approaches to existence. Ernie represents structure, routine, and the mundane aspects of daily life. Peter represents pure unrestrained desire, and the rejection of social norms. Their fights aren't just physical confrontations, they're metaphysical battles for the soul of their shared reality. Each chicken fight escalates in scope and destruction, suggesting that these conflicts are affecting the fundamental fabric of their universe. The level of destruction they cause should realistically end civilization as we know it, yet everything returns to normal afterwards. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence of reality itself being reset after each confrontation, maintaining the status quo through cosmic intervention. Now let's examine the true nature of Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire Family Guy universe. On the surface, he's a baby with advanced intelligence and homicidal tendencies. But dig deeper, and you'll find layers of psychological complexity that rival the greatest literary characters. Stewie's relationship with his sexuality isn't just character development. It represents the internal struggle between his intellectual advancement and his emotional immaturity. His confusion about his own identity reflects the broader theme of identity crisis that runs through the entire series. Every Griffin family member struggles with who they really are versus who they think they should be. His scientific inventions aren't just plot devices. They represent humanity's desire to control and manipulate reality itself. Stewie's time machine, his weather control device, his mind control technology, they're all attempts to impose order on a chaotic universe. But every time he uses these inventions, reality becomes more unstable, not less. The most disturbing aspect of Stewie's character is his relationship with Brian. Their friendship represents the only genuine emotional connection in the Griffin household, but it's also the most psychologically complex relationship in the series. Brian serves as both father figure and intellectual equal to Stewie, creating a dynamic that's simultaneously heartwarming and deeply troubling. Let's shift our focus to Meg Griffin, the most tragic character in the Family Guy universe. Her treatment by her family isn't just running gag. It's a systematic psychological experiment in how prolonged emotional abuse shapes personality development. Meg represents the scapegoat, the family member who absorbs all the dysfunction and toxicity so that the others can maintain their illusion of normalcy. But here's what most viewers miss. Meg isn't actually the weakest member of the Griffin family. She's the strongest. She endures constant psychological torture and emerges with her sanity relatively intact. In episodes where she finally snaps and fights back, we see glimpses of her true potential. She's not the victim, she's the survivor. The episodes where Meg temporarily gains popularity or success reveal something crucial about the Griffin family dynamic. They literally cannot function without having someone to blame and abuse. When Meg rises above her assigned role, the entire family structure begins to collapse. This suggests that their dysfunction isn't accidental. It's carefully maintained through deliberate psychological manipulation. Chris Griffin represents wasted potential and the tragedy of inherited dysfunction. His artistic abilities and occasional flashes of intelligence show us what he could become in a healthier environment. But he's trapped in a cycle of learned helplessness, modeled after his father's behavior patterns. Chris is what happens when natural talent is systematically crushed by family dysfunction. His relationship with his imaginary friend and his artistic pursuits aren't just character quirks. They're survival mechanisms, ways of maintaining some connection to his authentic self while navigating a family that demands conformity to their twisted value system. Peter Griffin himself is perhaps the most disturbing character when you really analyze his behavior patterns. He isn't just immature or irresponsible. He displays clear signs of multiple personality disorders, sociopathic tendencies, and complete lack of empathy for others. His actions regularly destroy lives, yet he never faces meaningful consequences. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence that Peter exists outside normal social and legal frameworks. He's protected by something larger than himself, some cosmic force that ensures his continued existence regardless of the chaos he creates. Peter Griffin isn't just a bad father and husband. He's an agent of chaos, a force of nature that exists to disrupt order and stability. His job history reveals something interesting about the economic reality of the Family Guy universe. He's worked for toy companies, television networks, and various other industries, often rising to positions of significant power despite his obvious incompetence. This suggests that the economic system itself is fundamentally broken, rewarding chaos and incompetence over skill and dedication. Lois Griffin's psychology is perhaps the most complex of all: the family members. She comes from wealth and privilege but chose to marry into dysfunction. This wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was a deliberate choice that reveals something dark about her character. Lois is addicted to drama and chaos. She could leave Peter at any time, but she stays because the dysfunction feeds something deep within her psyche. Her moments of extreme violence and rage aren't just comedy beats. They're glimpses into her true nature, carefully hidden beneath a facade of suburban respectability. Lois Schmidt Griffin is potentially the most dangerous member of the family because she understands manipulation and control in ways the others don't. Her relationship with her wealthy family reveals the broader class dynamics at play in the Family Guy universe. The Schmidts represent old money, established power structures, and systematic oppression disguised as respectability. Lois chose to reject that world, but she brought its values and methods into her marriage, creating a toxic hybrid of working-class dysfunction and upper-class manipulation. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this story, and its history reveals disturbing truths about American society. Founded on violence and maintained through systematic corruption, Quahog represents every small American town that's slowly dying while pretending everything is fine. The local government is openly corrupt, the police force is incompetent, and the social structures are designed to maintain inequality and dysfunction. Mayor West's obvious mental illness and continued political power isn't just absurd humor. It's commentary on how democratic systems can be manipulated by charismatic figures who appeal to voters' worst impulses. His policies are destructive and nonsensical, yet he remains popular because he validates the community's desire to avoid responsibility for their own problems. The recurring characters in Quahog each represent different aspects of American social dysfunction. Cleveland represents the loyal friend who enables destructive behavior rather than confronting it. Joe represents the warrior mentality that struggles to adapt to civilian life. Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual predation disguised as humor. But it's the relationship between these characters that reveals the true horror of the Family Guy universe. They're all trapped in cycles of mutual enablement, each one preventing the others from growing or changing. Their friendships aren't based on genuine affection or shared values. They're based on mutual need for validation of their worst impulses. The show's treatment of religion reveals another layer of its complex worldview. Religion in Family Guy isn't just mocked or dismissed. It's shown to be another system of control and manipulation, used by both believers and non-believers to justify their behavior and avoid taking responsibility for their actions. The various religious figures who appear throughout the series are almost universally corrupt, hypocritical, or mentally unstable. This isn't anti-religious sentiment. It's commentary on how spiritual concepts can be twisted to serve earthly power structures. The show suggests that genuine spirituality might exist, but it's constantly corrupted by human weakness and desire for control over others. Death himself appears as a recurring character, and his portrayal reveals something profound about the show's philosophy regarding mortality and meaning. Death isn't portrayed as evil or frightening. He's shown as tired, overworked, and occasionally compassionate. This suggests that mortality isn't the enemy in the Family Guy universe. Meaninglessness is the real enemy. The various celebrity encounters throughout the series serve a specific narrative function beyond simple humor. They represent the collision between fantasy and reality, between the Griffin family's delusional self-image and the actual impact they have on the world. Most celebrities in Family Guy are either destroyed by their encounter with the Griffins or reveal themselves to be just as dysfunctional and hollow. This pattern suggests that fame and success in their universe don't actually solve fundamental human problems. The celebrities are just as trapped in cycles of self-destruction and meaninglessness as the regular characters. Success becomes another form of prison, another way to avoid confronting deeper truths about existence and purpose. The show's handling of social and political issues reveals a deeply cynical worldview disguised as mindless entertainment. Every political position is shown to be equally corrupt and self-serving. Every social movement is revealed to have ulterior motives. Every attempt at progress is ultimately futile because human nature itself is fundamentally flawed. But here's where it gets interesting. This cynicism isn't presented as the final word. It's presented as the starting point for authentic human connection. Only after accepting the futility of external solutions do the characters occasionally find moments of genuine love, friendship, and meaning. These moments are rare and usually brief, but they represent the show's true message about what makes life worth living. The darker episodes of Family Guy, the ones that deal with serious topics like domestic violence, addiction, and mental illness, aren't just tonal experiments. They're glimpses into the reality that exists beneath the cartoon violence and crude humor. These episodes suggest that everything we've been laughing at is actually a coping mechanism, a way of dealing with trauma and pain that's too intense to face directly. Stewie and Brian's road trip episodes reveal this most clearly. When these two characters are alone together, away from the family dysfunction, their conversations become deeper and more meaningful. They discuss philosophy, mortality, and the nature of existence itself. These aren't just character development moments. They're the show's way of exploring serious themes without the distraction of constant humor. The time travel episodes create a complex mythology around cause and effect, free will, and determinism. When Stewie changes the past, the consequences ripple through reality in ways that suggest everything is connected to everything else. Small changes create massive alterations in the timeline, implying that individual choices have far more impact than we typically realize. But here's the disturbing part. Despite all the timeline changes and alternate realities, certain core patterns remain constant. The Griffin family dysfunction persists across multiple universes and timelines. This suggests that some aspects of human nature are so fundamental that they transcend individual choice and circumstance. The episodes that focus on Brian's writing career reveal the show's commentary on creative expression and artistic integrity. Brian's struggle to balance commercial success with authentic expression mirrors the show's own position in the entertainment landscape. Family Guy itself exists in the tension between meaningful content and commercial viability, between artistic expression and market demands. His relationship with other writers and artists in the series shows how creative communities can become toxic environments where competition and ego destroy the collaborative spirit that should drive artistic endeavors. The literary world in Family Guy is portrayed as pretentious, shallow, and ultimately meaningless. Yet Brian continues to pursue it because the alternative is accepting that his life has no greater purpose. The show's portrayal of education and intellectual development is particularly dark. Smart characters like Brian and Stewie are often shown to be more miserable than their less intelligent family members. Knowledge and awareness don't lead to happiness or fulfillment. They lead to greater understanding of how meaningless and chaotic existence really is. This anti-intellectual streak isn't promoting ignorance as bliss. It's questioning whether intelligence and education, as they currently exist in our society, actually serve human flourishing or just create new forms of suffering and alienation. The show suggests that wisdom might be different from intelligence, and that genuine understanding might require accepting mystery and uncertainty rather than seeking complete knowledge and control. The musical episodes and cutaway gags serve a specific psychological function beyond simple entertainment. They provide brief escapes from the relentless dysfunction of the main narrative. These moments of pure creativity and joy remind us what human beings are capable of when they're not trapped in cycles of self-destruction and mutual harm. But even these moments are tinged with sadness because they highlight how rare genuine happiness and creativity are in the Griffin family's daily life. The contrast makes their normal dysfunction seem even more tragic and unnecessary. As we reach the end of our deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, what emerges is a picture of a universe that's simultaneously hopeless and hopeful, meaningless and profound. The show presents human nature as fundamentally flawed and destructive, yet it also shows us moments of genuine love, creativity, and connection that make existence worthwhile despite its inherent tragedy. The Griffin family represents all of us at our worst and occasionally at our best. Their dysfunction is our dysfunction, magnified and exaggerated for comedic effect, but rooted in recognizable human weaknesses and fears. Their rare moments of genuine connection remind us that love and meaning are possible, even in the midst of chaos and pain. The true lore of Family Guy isn't hidden in elaborate conspiracy theories or complex mythologies. It's hidden in plain sight, in the psychological patterns and relationship dynamics that drive every episode. It's a show about damaged people trying to connect with each other and failing most of the time, but occasionally succeeding in ways that make all the failure worthwhile. And maybe that's the most profound truth of all. That meaning doesn't come from avoiding dysfunction and chaos, but from finding ways to love and connect despite the inevitable presence of dysfunction and chaos in all human relationships. The Griffins aren't aspirational characters. They're cautionary tales and sources of recognition, mirrors that reflect our own struggles with identity, purpose, and connection. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching crude humor and pop culture references. You're watching one of the most complex examinations of human nature ever created, disguised as mindless entertainment, but actually offering profound insights into what it means to be human in a universe that often seems indifferent to our suffering and our joy. Sweet dreams, and may your own family dysfunction be slightly less chaotic than the Griffins, but no less full of unexpected moments of love and meaning that make it all worthwhile. The lore of Family Guy is ultimately the lore of being human, and that's a story that never really ends. It just keeps evolving with each new episode of our own lives. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy feels like a fever dream that somehow makes perfect sense? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, contradictory, and absolutely fascinating lore of one of television's most chaotic animated families. From timeline inconsistencies that would make Doctor Who writers jealous to character deaths that stick about as well as wet spaghetti on a wall, we're exploring every twisted corner of the Griffin universe. So grab your favorite blanket, settle in, and prepare for a journey through 20-plus years of animated madness that will either put you to sleep or keep you up all night questioning everything you thought you knew about Quahog. Let's start with something that will immediately make your brain hurt in the most soothing way possible. The Griffin family timeline is more tangled than Christmas lights that have been stored in your attic for 3 years. Peter Griffin has somehow managed to work at a toy factory, a brewery, and about 17 other jobs while maintaining the same age and living in the same house. His children have been attending high school for over 2 decades, which either makes them the worst students in Rhode Island or suggests that time moves differently in their universe. Consider this mind-bending fact that perfectly captures the show's relationship with continuity. In early seasons, Chris Griffin was clearly established as being 14 years old. Fast forward through hundreds of episodes, multiple presidential elections, and several major world events, and Chris is still somehow 14. The same applies to Meg, who has been stuck in her teenage nightmare for so long that she could probably qualify for some kind of Guinness World Record for longest adolescence in television history. But here's where it gets even more deliciously confusing. The show occasionally references real-world events that have happened during its run, suggesting that some time has passed in their universe. Characters mention current technology, reference recent movies, and sometimes even acknowledge that things have changed. Yet the core family dynamics, ages, and circumstances remain frozen in this perfect amber of animated time, where nothing truly progresses, but everything constantly evolves. This temporal flexibility isn't a bug in Family Guy's programming. It's actually one of its most genius features. By refusing to be bound by traditional continuity, the writers have created a sandbox where literally anything can happen. Peter can die and come back to life. The family can move to different locations and then inexplicably return home. Characters can have completely different backstories from episode to episode, and somehow it all just works within the show's internal logic. Speaking of death, let's talk about the most famous resurrection in Family Guy history, which reads like a bizarre fairy tale designed specifically for adults who need to process the concept of impermanence in the safest possible way. Brian Griffin, the intellectual dog who serves as the family's voice of reason when he's not being a pretentious writer stereotype, was killed off in what seemed like a permanent way. The internet collectively lost its mind, fans organized protests, and for a brief moment, it looked like the show had actually committed to a major permanent change. But then, in true Family Guy fashion, they brought him back through time travel shenanigans that made about as much sense as you'd expect. The whole arc became this perfect metaphor for how the show treats consequence and permanence. Nothing is ever truly gone. Nothing is ever truly permanent. But the emotional impact of these fake deaths still somehow manages to hit viewers right in the feelings. It's like a magic trick where you can see exactly how it's done, but still feel amazed when the rabbit appears. This approach to character mortality extends throughout the entire show's history. Characters have died, been resurrected, killed again, and come back so many times that death in the Family Guy universe feels more like a temporary inconvenience than an actual ending. It creates this weirdly comforting atmosphere where you never have to worry about permanent loss, because in this world, everything can be undone with enough creativity and complete disregard for logical consistency. Now let's drift into the geographical mysteries of Quahog, Rhode Island, a town that exists in a space that defies both physics and geography in ways that should probably concern the local authorities. According to various episodes, Quahog is simultaneously a small, close-knit community where everyone knows each other and a sprawling metropolis with enough infrastructure to support major television stations, multiple hospitals, and apparently an infinite number of bars for Peter to get kicked out of. The town's layout changes depending on what the episode requires, which creates this dreamlike quality where familiar locations can suddenly be in completely different places or have entirely new neighbors. The Griffin house sometimes has a backyard that extends for miles and sometimes appears to be crammed between other houses with barely enough room for a garbage can. It's like living inside a memory where the details shift and change based on what feels most important at any given moment. This geographical flexibility extends to the show's treatment of distance and travel time. Characters can walk to locations that should be hours apart, drive to places that exist in different states entirely, or somehow end up in foreign countries through a series of increasingly implausible coincidences. It creates this sense that the world of Family Guy operates on dream logic, where emotional distance matters more than physical distance, and where you can end up anywhere if the story needs you there. The town itself has a personality that shifts and changes like a living entity. Sometimes Quahog is presented as a typical New England community with normal problems and reasonable people. Other times it's revealed to be home to the most bizarre collection of individuals ever assembled in one place, including but not limited to time travelers, aliens, talking animals, and people who seem to exist purely to serve as punchlines for increasingly elaborate jokes. Let's talk about the show's relationship with reality, which operates on multiple levels simultaneously in a way that would make philosophy professors weep with joy or frustration. Family Guy exists in a universe where talking babies, intellectually gifted dogs, and interdimensional travel are all perfectly normal and accepted parts of daily life. Yet somehow, the characters are constantly surprised by things that are far less remarkable than their everyday existence. Stewie Griffin, the family's infant mastermind, represents perhaps the most fascinating example of this reality-bending approach to storytelling. He's simultaneously a normal baby who requires diaper changes and feeding, and a genius inventor capable of creating time machines, death rays, and weather control devices. Other characters sometimes understand his advanced speech, and sometimes treat him like a normal baby, depending on what works best for the joke or story being told. This selective awareness extends throughout the entire cast and creates layers of reality that exist simultaneously without ever really contradicting each other. Brian is a dog who drives cars, drinks alcohol, and has complex romantic relationships with human women. Yet he also sometimes exhibits normal dog behaviors like chasing squirrels or getting excited about walks. The show never bothers to explain these contradictions because they don't need explanation in a universe where consistency is less important than entertainment value. The genius of this approach is that it mirrors how our own minds work when we're drifting off to sleep. In dreams, contradictory things can exist side by side without causing any distress. You can be simultaneously in your childhood home and your current apartment, talking to people who are both alive and dead, engaging in activities that make perfect sense within the dream context, but would be impossible in waking life. Family Guy captures this dream logic perfectly, creating a viewing experience that feels familiar and comforting even when it's completely absurd. Peter Griffin himself embodies this dream logic in human form. He's somehow managed to maintain steady employment despite being fired from multiple jobs, sometimes in the same episode. His incompetence is legendary, yet he consistently stumbles into situations where his particular brand of chaos somehow saves the day, or at least doesn't cause permanent damage to anyone who matters. He's like the universe's way of proving that sometimes being completely unprepared for everything is actually the best preparation for anything. His relationship with his family operates on this same dream logic frequency. He clearly loves his wife and children, but he also regularly forgets their names, ignores their needs, and puts them in danger through his various schemes and misadventures. Yet somehow, these contradictions never destroy the family unit because love in the Family Guy universe is more about intention than action, more about showing up than being competent. The show's treatment of flashbacks and cutaway gags creates another layer of reality that exists parallel to the main narrative without ever quite intersecting with it in ways that make traditional sense. These segments often contradict established character histories or present completely different versions of events that supposedly happened in the same timeline. Rather than being confusing, these contradictions become part of the show's charm, like listening to someone tell you about their dreams, where all the details keep shifting but the emotional core remains consistent. Let's explore the mysterious depths of the show's pop culture obsession, which functions like a massive shared unconscious where every reference, parody, and homage exists simultaneously across multiple decades of entertainment history. Family Guy doesn't just reference popular culture, it exists inside it like a fish swimming through an ocean of collective memory. The show treats the entire history of television, movies, music, and celebrity culture as one enormous playground where everything is equally accessible and equally fair game for reinterpretation. This creates a viewing experience that feels like browsing through a vast library of cultural memories, where you might encounter references to obscure 1970s television shows alongside parodies of current internet memes. The temporal mixing of references contributes to the show's dreamlike quality, where past and present blur together in ways that feel natural within the context of the viewing experience, but would make no sense if you tried to map them chronologically. The character interactions within this cultural soup create their own form of logic that operates independently of real-world consistency. Characters can discuss events from different time periods, as if they all happened yesterday, reference movies that wouldn't exist in their established timeline, and demonstrate knowledge of cultural phenomena that should be completely outside their experience. Yet somehow, these anachronisms never feel jarring because they're delivered with such confidence and integration into the story flow. This approach to cultural reference creates a kind of comfort food for the brain, where familiar elements from your entertainment consumption history get mixed together in new combinations that feel both surprising and inevitable. It's like having someone remix your favorite songs in ways you never expected, but that somehow work perfectly for the mood you didn't know you were in. The show's relationship with its own history creates another fascinating layer of complexity that rewards long-term viewers while remaining accessible to newcomers. Jokes and storylines sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, creating this sense of continuity within the chaos. Characters will occasionally mention things that happened in previous seasons as if they actually matter to the ongoing narrative, even though the show regularly contradicts its own established facts. This selective continuity operates like a friendship where you share inside jokes and references that have built up over years of interaction, but you don't expect every conversation to reference everything that has ever happened between you. Some things matter, some things don't, and the distinction between what's important and what's forgettable shifts based on context and emotional relevance, rather than chronological significance. Family Guy's approach to emotional storytelling creates waves of feeling that wash over viewers in patterns designed to keep you engaged, without overwhelming you with too much intensity. The show regularly shifts between completely absurd comedy and surprisingly touching moments of family connection, often within the same episode or even the same scene. This emotional rhythm mirrors the natural fluctuations of consciousness as you transition from waking awareness to sleep. The touching moments often come from unexpected sources and catch viewers off guard in ways that feel authentic despite occurring within completely artificial contexts. A conversation between Peter and his children might reveal genuine insight into parenting challenges, even though it takes place during a storyline involving time-traveling robots or interdimensional portals. These moments of sincerity exist alongside the absurdity without diminishing either aspect of the experience. The show's treatment of family dynamics operates on multiple emotional frequencies simultaneously. The Griffin family clearly cares about each other deeply, but they also regularly treat each other terribly in ways that would destroy real relationships. Yet somehow, the underlying love and commitment always reasserts itself when it really matters, creating this sense that no matter how chaotic or dysfunctional things get, the core connections remain solid. This emotional safety net allows viewers to enjoy the chaos without worrying about permanent damage to characters they've grown to care about. It's like watching a family of professional stunt performers who can survive any explosion or catastrophe because you know they're wearing invisible protective gear made of animated resilience and narrative necessity. The character of Lois Griffin represents perhaps the most complex emotional anchor in the show's universe. She's simultaneously the voice of reason and a participant in the chaos, capable of being both the responsible adult who keeps the family functioning and the enabler who allows Peter's schemes to continue destroying everything around them. Her character embodies the show's approach to moral complexity, where people can be simultaneously good and bad, smart and foolish, loving and selfish, without these contradictions canceling each other out. Her relationship with her family creates emotional touchstones that ground the show's more surreal elements in recognizable human experiences. Her frustration with Peter's behavior, her concern for her children's well-being, and her own occasional lapses into questionable judgment all feel authentic, despite occurring within completely unrealistic scenarios. She becomes the emotional center around which all the chaos can orbit safely. The supporting characters in Quahog create a community ecosystem that feels both intimately familiar and completely unpredictable. Neighbors like Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland form a social network that somehow manages to remain stable despite regular exposure to Peter's reality-warping influence. Their friendship operates on the kind of dream logic where people can be simultaneously best friends and completely incompatible personalities, where loyalty and annoyance coexist without creating lasting conflict. These relationships mirror the kind of social connections that exist in small communities where people are stuck with each other regardless of whether they actually like each other. The result is a social dynamic where characters have learned to accept and work around each other's flaws rather than trying to change them, creating a sense of unconditional acceptance that's both touching and slightly disturbing. The show's approach to problem-solving reflects this same community dynamic, where issues are rarely resolved through traditional methods, but instead get worked around, ignored, or transformed into different problems that are somehow more manageable. Characters don't really grow and change in traditional narrative arcs, but they do develop coping strategies and adaptive behaviors that allow them to function within their chaotic environment. This creates a viewing experience that's surprisingly relaxing despite the constant chaos, because you learn to trust that somehow everything will work out in ways that might not make sense, but will feel satisfying within the show's internal logic. It's like being assured that no matter how complicated your dreams get, you'll always wake up in your own bed with all your problems exactly where you left them. The show's treatment of time and memory creates layers of nostalgia that operate simultaneously across multiple decades of cultural history. Episodes regularly feature flashbacks to different time periods that may or may not be consistent with previously established character histories, creating a sense that the past is fluid and changeable, rather than fixed and determined. This approach to history mirrors how memory actually works in human consciousness, where details shift and change based on current emotional needs rather than maintaining strict factual accuracy. Characters sometimes remember the same events differently in different episodes, and these conflicting memories are presented as equally valid, rather than evidence of inconsistent writing. This creates a universe where subjective experience matters more than objective truth, where what feels right is more important than what actually happened according to some external standard of accuracy. The result is a storytelling approach that feels surprisingly honest about how human memory and family mythology actually function. Families create shared stories about their history that serve emotional and social functions rather than documentary purposes. And these stories change over time to meet the evolving needs of the family system. Family Guy captures this dynamic perfectly by treating its own history as a living, breathing entity, rather than a fixed record of past events. As we reach the end of our journey through the wonderfully contradictory universe of Family Guy, it becomes clear that the show's greatest achievement might be its ability to create comfort through chaos, familiarity through absurdity, and relaxation through constant activity. The show operates like a perfect sleep aid for the modern mind, providing just enough stimulation to keep you engaged while maintaining just enough consistency to keep you feeling safe and secure. The lore of Family Guy isn't really about the specific details of character histories or plot continuities. Instead, it's about creating a universe where change and stability can coexist, where contradictions don't need resolution, and where the most important truth is that somehow, everything always works out in the end, even when it doesn't make any logical sense. In a world where consistency and predictability often feel like distant memories, Family Guy offers the radical proposition that maybe coherence is overrated anyway. Maybe what we really need is a space where we can let go of our need for everything to make sense and just enjoy the ride, secure in the knowledge that no matter how weird things get, we're still fundamentally safe in this animated universe where love conquers all, even when love looks suspiciously like mutual tolerance for each other's most annoying qualities. So, as you drift off tonight, remember that somewhere in an animated Rhode Island, a family of lovable disasters continues their eternal cycle of chaos and reconciliation, proving night after night that sometimes the best stories are the ones that never really end. They just keep getting more interesting. Sweet dreams from Quahog, where nothing makes sense and everything works out exactly the way it should. Did you know that Family Guy has been secretly building one of the most complex fictional universes on television for over 2 decades? And tonight, we're diving deep into every hidden connection, conspiracy theory, and mind-bending detail that will either put you to sleep or keep you awake all night thinking about how Brian Griffin might actually be the smartest character in animated television history. Welcome to the most comprehensive exploration of Family Guy lore ever assembled, where we'll uncover the hidden patterns that connect seemingly random episodes across 20-plus seasons, reveal the dark psychological underpinnings of Peter Griffin's behavior, and examine why this seemingly simple animated sitcom contains more philosophical depth than most people realize. Let's start with something that seems innocent on the surface but becomes deeply unsettling when you really think about it. The fact that Stewie Griffin, a 1-year-old baby, possesses technology that surpasses anything available in our current reality. His time machine alone represents engineering capabilities that would revolutionize human civilization. Yet nobody in his family seems to notice or care that their infant has created devices that violate the fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. The implications of Stewie's inventions extend far beyond simple comedy. When you consider that he's built ray guns, mind control devices, teleportation equipment, and vehicles capable of interdimensional travel, all while maintaining the physical and cognitive limitations of a toddler. This suggests either that the Griffin family exists in a universe where the laws of science operate completely differently, or that Stewie himself represents something far more extraordinary than a precocious child. Think about the episodes where Stewie travels through time and encounters multiple versions of himself from different timelines. Each iteration of Stewie possesses the same impossible technological capabilities, which implies that his genius transcends individual timeline variations. This consistency across dimensional boundaries suggests that Stewie's intelligence might be a fundamental constant in the Family Guy multiverse, rather than a random genetic anomaly. But here's where things get really interesting when we examine the relationship between Stewie's technological capabilities and Brian's intellectual development throughout the series. Brian Griffin starts as a relatively normal talking dog who enjoys literature and maintains liberal political views. However, as the seasons progress, his personality becomes increasingly complex, cynical, and philosophically sophisticated, almost as if he's being influenced by prolonged exposure to Stewie's advanced technology and interdimensional adventures. The evolution of Brian's character raises questions about the nature of consciousness and intelligence in the Family Guy universe. If a dog can develop human-level cognitive abilities and engage in complex, philosophical discussions, then what does this say about the fundamental nature of reality in Quahog? The fact that Brian's intelligence continues expanding throughout the series while other characters remain relatively static suggests that something unique is happening to him. Specifically, consider the episodes where Brian dies and is replaced by Vinny, the replacement dog, who, despite being the same species, lacks Brian's intellectual capabilities. This proves that Brian's intelligence isn't simply a species-wide trait, but something specifically tied to his individual consciousness. The temporary replacement storyline also demonstrates how integral Brian has become to the family dynamic, not just as a pet, but as a legitimate family member whose absence creates genuine emotional trauma. The relationship between Brian and Stewie represents one of the most complex friendships in animated television, spanning adventures through time, space, and alternate dimensions. Their bond transcends typical pet-owner relationships and approaches something resembling true intellectual partnership. This dynamic becomes even more fascinating when you consider that their adventures often involve visiting timelines where their relationship takes different forms, sometimes as friends, sometimes as enemies, and occasionally as something approaching equals moving deeper into Family Guy lore. We encounter the recurring theme of Peter Griffin's seemingly limitless capacity for causing destruction, while somehow avoiding serious consequences. Peter has crashed vehicles through buildings, started international incidents, caused environmental disasters, and engaged in behavior that would realistically result in imprisonment or death. Yet he continues living his suburban lifestyle with minimal repercussions for his actions. This pattern suggests that Peter might exist within some kind of protective narrative bubble, where conventional rules of cause and effect don't apply in the same way they would for normal people. The consistency of his survival across increasingly dangerous situations implies either supernatural intervention or existence within a simulated reality where certain characters are programmed to be essentially indestructible. The Griffin family's relationship with death itself provides another layer of complexity to the series' lore. Multiple characters have died and been resurrected, Brian's temporary death being the most notable example, but there are numerous instances where characters should have died, but somehow survived catastrophic events. This casual relationship with mortality suggests that the Family Guy universe operates under different existential rules than our reality. Quahog itself emerges as a character in the series when you examine how the town responds to the Griffin family's constant chaos. Despite Peter's regular destruction of property and public safety, the community continues functioning normally as if nothing happened. This resilience suggests either that Quahog exists outside normal space-time, or that the town itself possesses some kind of regenerative properties that allow it to recover from damage. The recurring characters in Family Guy form an intricate web of relationships that span decades of episodes, each bringing their own psychological complexities to the narrative. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the series creates interesting questions about character continuity and the nature of friendship in long-running animated series. His experiences in his own spin-off show technically exist within the same universe, but rarely get referenced in Family Guy proper, creating a kind of parallel narrative space. Glenn Quagmire represents perhaps the most problematic character in terms of Family Guy lore, because his behavior often crosses lines that would be completely unacceptable in real life. Yet he's treated as a quirky neighbor rather than a legitimate threat. This treatment reveals something disturbing about the moral framework of the Family Guy universe, where certain types of harmful behavior are normalized through repetition and comedic presentation. The Chicken Man fights between Peter and Ernie. The giant chicken deserves special attention because they represent some of the most elaborately choreographed sequences in the entire series. These battles often span multiple locations, involve massive collateral damage, and demonstrate fighting capabilities that far exceed what either character should possess based on their apparent physical attributes. The chicken fights serve as almost mythological episodes within the series where normal rules are completely suspended. When examining these extended fight sequences, you notice they follow patterns similar to classic mythology, where heroes and monsters engage in battles that reshape the landscape around them. The destruction caused during these fights would realistically devastate Quahog's infrastructure and economy. Yet everything returns to normal by the next episode, as if these epic confrontations exist in a separate reality layer. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for create their own complex narrative space where characters interact with historical figures, fictional characters, and alternate versions of themselves. These brief sequences often contain more concentrated storytelling than entire episodes of other shows, and they've created a vast library of micro-narratives that exist alongside the main Family Guy timeline. Some cutaway gags reference each other across seasons, creating a meta-narrative about the nature of memory and storytelling within the Family Guy universe. The fact that characters sometimes remember events from cutaway gags in later episodes suggests that these sequences aren't just comedic diversions but actual experiences that exist within the characters' shared reality. The show's treatment of religion and spirituality adds another layer to its lore, with multiple episodes exploring different afterlife concepts. Divine intervention scenarios and questions about the nature of good and evil. Death appears as a recurring character who seems genuinely concerned about maintaining cosmic balance, which implies that the Family Guy universe operates under specific metaphysical rules. Episodes featuring death reveal that the afterlife in Family Guy functions more like a bureaucracy than a spiritual realm with specific procedures for soul collection and processing. This bureaucratic approach to mortality suggests that existence in the Family Guy universe might be more regulated and systematic than it initially appears, despite the surface-level chaos. The time travel episodes create fascinating paradoxes and timeline complications that the show sometimes acknowledges and sometimes completely ignores. This inconsistent approach to temporal mechanics suggests that time itself might function differently in the Family Guy universe, perhaps operating more like a narrative device than a fixed physical law. Stewie's time travel adventures often involve meeting historical figures who react to him as if talking babies are perfectly normal. This consistency across different time periods implies that the unusual characteristics of Family Guy characters might be universal constants that exist across all timelines rather than modern anomalies. The show's relationship with celebrity culture creates interesting questions about the nature of reality within its universe. Real celebrities often appear as themselves, but they interact with the fictional Griffin family as if they're legitimate public figures. This blending of real and fictional personalities suggests that the Family Guy universe might exist parallel to our own reality rather than completely separate from it. When celebrities appear in Family Guy, they often display exaggerated versions of their public personas, which raises questions about whether these are the actual celebrities or fictional representations based on public perception. The show's treatment of celebrity interactions reveals something interesting about how fictional universes can comment on and interact with real-world culture. The evolution of animation quality throughout Family Guy's run creates its own meta-narrative about the nature of visual reality within the show. Early episodes feature simpler animation styles, while later seasons display increasingly sophisticated visual effects. This progression mirrors technological advancement in our reality, but within the show it might represent something deeper about the nature of visual perception in the Family Guy universe. Episodes that specifically reference the show's animation style or production history create fascinating recursive loops where characters become aware of their fictional nature without fully breaking the fourth wall. These moments suggest that the characters might exist on multiple levels of reality simultaneously, both as fictional constructs and as conscious beings within their own universe. The Griffin family's economic situation provides another layer of complexity because Peter's job history and income level should realistically make their lifestyle impossible. Yet they maintain a suburban home, support multiple vehicles, and finance Stewie's expensive scientific experiments. This economic impossibility suggests that traditional rules of finance and resource management don't apply in the Family Guy universe. Episodes that focus on the family's financial struggles reveal that they do face economic consequences, but these problems get resolved through increasingly absurd means that wouldn't work in real life. This pattern implies that the Griffin family exists within a narrative framework where problems require narrative solutions rather than realistic ones. The show's treatment of education and intelligence creates interesting patterns when you examine how different characters learn and grow. Brian's intellectual development contrasts sharply with Peter's consistent ignorance, despite both characters having access to similar information and experiences. This disparity suggests that intelligence in the Family Guy universe might be more fixed and character-specific than it is in reality. Stewie's advanced knowledge, despite his infant status, raises questions about how learning and development work in this fictional universe. His vocabulary and technical expertise far exceed what any child could realistically possess. Yet other baby characters in the show display normal infant behavior. This inconsistency implies that Stewie's intelligence might be supernatural rather than developmental. The recurring theme of alternate dimensions and parallel universes in Family Guy creates a complex multiverse structure where different versions of familiar characters exist with varying personality traits and life circumstances. These alternate reality episodes suggest that the main Family Guy timeline is just one possible configuration among infinite variations. When characters travel between dimensions, they often encounter versions of themselves that made different life choices or develop different personality traits. This concept implies that character identity in the Family Guy universe might be more fluid and circumstantial than it initially appears. The multiverse episodes also raise questions about free will and determinism within the show's cosmology. The show's approach to historical events creates fascinating anachronisms and alternative history scenarios that suggest the Family Guy universe might exist in a timeline that diverges from our own reality in subtle but important ways. Episodes set in historical periods often include modern elements that shouldn't exist, which implies either time travel influence or an alternate historical development. Family Guy's treatment of technology advancement shows interesting patterns where some innovations appear decades ahead of schedule, while others lag behind realistic development timelines. This inconsistent technological progression suggests that innovation in the Family Guy universe might be driven by different factors than in our reality. The psychological depth of individual characters becomes more apparent when you examine their behavior patterns across multiple seasons. Peter's childlike wonder and destructive impulses suggest possible developmental disorders or psychological trauma that the show explores through comedy rather than serious analysis. This approach reveals character complexity while maintaining entertainment value. Brian's intellectual pretensions and emotional vulnerabilities create a character study about the relationship between intelligence and happiness. His struggles with depression, alcoholism, and unfulfilled artistic ambitions represent serious psychological themes disguised as animated comedy. This layered characterization demonstrates how Family Guy uses humor to explore deeper human experiences. Lois Griffin's role as the family anchor reveals interesting dynamics about gender roles and family stability in dysfunctional households. Her ability to maintain sanity while managing Peter's chaos, Stewie's schemes, and the general dysfunction suggests either extraordinary psychological resilience or possible supernatural intervention. The supporting characters in Family Guy each contribute to a larger tapestry of human behavior and social commentary. Joe Swanson's disability and heroic personality create discussions about capability and determination, while Mayor West's bizarre behavior comments on political leadership and civic responsibility. As we reach the end of this exploration into Family Guy lore, it becomes clear that what appears to be a simple animated sitcom actually contains layers of philosophical complexity, psychological depth, and narrative sophistication that reward careful analysis. The show's ability to maintain comedic entertainment while exploring serious themes demonstrates the power of animation as a storytelling medium. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying awake, thinking about these connections, Family Guy continues evolving and adding new layers to its already complex mythology. Each episode contributes to a larger narrative about family dysfunction, American culture, and the absurd nature of modern existence, wrapped in accessible animated comedy that somehow makes profound observations about the human condition feel effortlessly entertaining and surprisingly profound.